Matthew Nussbaum, Carl Bernstein, Jeffrey Lord, and Philip Mudd. Matt, first to you, fresh meat. You're new on the panel here, so I want to start with you. And if I can, I want to start with the tapes. You cover the White House. What do you make of the president's comments today, playing coy with the idea, maybe I'll let you know if I have tapes pretty soon?
Well, he's the reality TV president, and we know he loves to build suspense, and that's what he's been doing with these tapes. It sure seems to us observers like there are no tapes. If there are, you'd imagine we would have found out by now, but the White House has refused to take questions on that. Today you said Trump had, I'll tell you guys in a little while. So I don't know if we're going to get an answer on that, but I think James Comey will not get his wish. It does not appear there are going to be tapes of those conversations.
Probably get an answer by June 23rd because the House Intelligence Committee is now asking for some kind of answer if they push it. Kirsten Powers, Jeff Sessions, testifying before the Senate Appropriations Committee, but it's not going to be about appropriations. They have a lot of questions for him, and he's in an interesting spot, right? The Senate is skeptical of him because he had a run-in during his confirmation hearing when he testified about things, and he had to correct it later on. And the president, took 48 hours to even suggest whether or not he had confidence in him this week. So Jeff Sessions is going to have an interesting time.
Yeah, well, I think, it's just always a problem when you forget to tell about meetings or contacts that you have with the Russians, which seems to be a recurring theme with people who are associated with Trump. And I think that that's why a lot of people have a lot of suspicions, is because it just seems like when something was so central to the election that you would remember these things. And so I do think that, yes, we'll probably have a lot more interest in those kinds of relationships than, other sort of regular business.
There's been reporting about the questions about whether there was yet a third meeting between Jeff Sessions and the ambassador. He'll be asked, I imagine, under oath, outright, when he's sitting there, whether or not that happened.
Yeah, well, right, and that again, we go back, when you have all of the problems that he had when he had forgotten the other meeting, then you think, how could there'd be a third meeting that you wouldn't remember? It's puzzling that there are so many connections to Russia, and then also that they're forgotten.
Scott Jennings, and now there's Dianne Feinstein on the Senate Judiciary Committee writing a letter to Chuck Grassley, the chair, saying, hey, look, we need a separate investigation into obstruction of justice. Is there any chance, under the moon and the sun, that Chuck Grassley will agree to that?
No, I think Dianne Feinstein, she had actually said some rather reasonable things until this, and she's probably getting a lot of angry phone calls from her constituents about it, who tend to be more liberal than the rest of the country, so now she's got to respond to them. So, no, I don't. And that's why you have the special counsel investigation. Isn't that what they're supposed to be looking into? And so it seems more of a political letter to me than anything. And so, look, on this Russian stuff, I don't think anyone is disputing. These people are bad people. They intervene all over the world. Qatar this week, we saw them trying to mess around out there. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to collude with someone to do it. And so I think as all these questionings are going on, investigations need to happen, let's see where it takes us before we all hop on our jump to conclusion mats.
It's interesting you said everyone agrees. James Comey testified yesterday that the president never talked to him or never seemed curious at all about Russian meddling in the U.S. election or Russians around the world. So he might be an exception to your everyone rule. Maria Cardona, you heard the pushback there on Dianne Feinstein, what Scott was saying. Look, there is a special counsel investigating right now. The Senate Intelligence Committee, which Dianne Feinstein sits on, just held hearings yesterday. So why do you need this separate investigation?
Well, because I think, first of all, members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, that is part of their role, right? They have various oversight roles. But I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that the fact that Dianne Feinstein is asking for this, I think really indicates both the level of frustration with the Trump White House and Republicans, but mostly the Trump White House, which hasn't seemed to understand the enormity of what Russia has done. I wish they would agree with you, Scott, but clearly the president does not, because he's never said a bad word about Russia or a bad word about Vladimir Putin. But I also think it indicates that we are in a different space now. After the Jim Comey testimony, as much as Trump and his supporters want to claim victory, it was completely the opposite. It was a debacle for them. And so, this, like I said before, this dark cloud has now become a funnel cloud, and they're in a tough spot.
I heard the dulcet tones of Jeffrey Lord laughing right there. We will get to you, Jeffrey, in a second, but Philip Mudd is new to our panel tonight, and I want to get a question to him. And there is a significant development tonight. We're learning that this friend of James Comey, who was the one that got the memo and released it to the media, is now communicating with the Senate Judiciary Committee through the special counsel's office. That's an interesting little twist there. What does it tell you?
tells me a couple things. First, if I were out there looking for information in this investigation and I'm in the Congress, I would not be going to a friend of James Comey. The FBI has all the memos, and the former director, by releasing one of them, in my judgment, I'm not a lawyer, but in my judgment, by releasing one of them to the public, has pretty much given a free ticket to the Congress to say, hey, if you're giving this stuff out to the public via one of your friends, how can the FBI or the special counsel come to us and say, we can't see it? I think it's right for those conversations to be going through the special counsel. I think the special counsel investigation, which we never hear about, is far more significant than the congressional investigations. But there has to be a focal point process here to make these judgments. I just think Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is in a tough place. How do you say to the Congress no when the media has it?
All right, more to talk about coming up.